The other important one would be the Eucharist, whether it's the real presence or whether it's merely symbolic. And this actually gets to another question. Maybe we can talk about more in depth, because there's another question here. I'll just throw in the chat real quick. Maybe I'll talk about this more in detail, but it's this. What's the difference between the Protestant and Catholic communion and Eucharist, respectively? So this, for me, of course, the Catholics believe in real presence. They believe in transubstantiation. And there are many different variations on this. Most of these variations, became popular around the time of the Protestant Reformation, especially being symbolic. I think there's a really good podcast, by the way, on the history of the Reformation that I can put in the description of this video once I post it and once I find it. It's a very good podcast. It's by this historian on the Reformation, and he argues that it's not what you think, that it was actually Luther wasn't trying to destroy the church or anything like that. And it's very, very fascinating. It's only about an hour and a half long if you like podcasts. So, but there are all these variations in between, like real presence and then symbolism and like all the in between that came popular in the Protestant Reformation. Now, this became less of a sticking point for me once I learned more about philosophy, and I realized, that the difference between properties and substances. Substance is just what a thing is, right? It's a thing that bears the properties, and the properties are the things in here in the substance. So the substance would be just whatever bare substance, and the properties would be, say, the bread with the communion. The bread changes, right? It's the real presence of Christ. So the properties stay the same and the substance changes. So that's what happens in the real presence. And once I realized that and I kind of worked that through, I was like, that makes sense once you understand what properties and substances are. Because many times in Catholic thinking, they'll put it in these scholastic philosophical terms from the medieval period, because that's when it all got worked out. Early medieval with the early theologians and after the patristic fathers, and then later medieval theologians like Aquinas, they worked these out in philosophical terms. So just getting to know those philosophical terms, and I was like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. And so that sort of melted away from me. And, I don't fully understand these things still, I still have trouble, and I'm not saying you need a philosophical mind either, because my beautiful wife, she probably appreciates the real presence in the Eucharist more than I do, and she, she's got a great philosophical critical thinking mind, but as far as like knowing all these terms and reading the philosophers, she hasn't done that. But she can appreciate and understand that that's really Jesus a lot better than I can. And so there are still times, when I'm just like, but that's on me, right? That's the difference between the metaphysics of something and the epistemology. Like I always go back to the metaphysics of it, is that actually is the case, whether I recognize it or not. The epistemology of it is like, well, I'm not sure right now. Like the epistemology of it is whether I know, and that's on me. That's my response as to how am I going to respond to what's really real.